Good day, Ambassador Polyanskiy. Very nice talking to you. I appreciate very much the opportunity to ask you a couple of questions, given the fact that in Germany, where I'm located right now, you never hear the Russian view. You always hear the NATO point of view. So I welcome your point of view, given the fact that you are speaking from the United Nations and have a top international attitude. So what would be your view on the fact that it seems that the German government tries to show leadership, in quote, by taking the lead of the coalition of the willing, who have declared that their aim is the strategic defeat of Russia? What is your opinion on that?
Thank you very much, Ms. LaRouche, for this opportunity. Indeed, I think there is a big deficit of free information from my country, of views from my country right now, because European Union in particular, and Germany and some other countries of the EU and NATO have imposed very strict censorship on whatever views are being expressed that do not coincide with the views voiced in the West. And if anything that is being pronounced doesn't fit into official narrative, they declare it Russian propaganda or whatever. So this is very bad times for the freedom of speech and expression. So thank you for this opportunity. We very much are saddened by what is happening in Germany, in Europe as such. This is hard to understand from rational point of view because what is being done, especially in geostrategic sphere in relations to Russia, is very damaging to the current state of affairs in Europe, to the future of Europe, to its geopolitical stance. I think that all European citizens, including those in Germany, first and foremost, have already witnessed the direct consequences of the measures that EU has been unilaterally introducing against Russia from at least 2022. This crusade against Russian culture, against Russian identity, language, also decision to get rid of Russian energy sources, of cheap energy resources, which were the backbone of economic growth in a lot of European countries, first and foremost Germany. This will, of course, have and already having very devastating consequences for the well-being of European and German citizens. And this is a clear choice of confrontation. And this is Europe's choice. We can only deplore it. We can only regret it. But of course, we can't save Europe from shooting in its both feet deliberately. This is very bad, but we can only observe it. And what is even more disturbing is that the official propaganda in Germany, in Europe, in all these countries, is now busy portraying the image of enemy, of a foe from Russia, and is busy brainwashing European citizens, especially young citizens, who do not have any historic memory and very vague knowledge of the past, to brainwash them and to show to them that Russia is an enemy, that the only way for Europe to move forward would be to defeat Russia, preferably on the battlefield. So there is a clear sign, clear vision that Europe is preparing itself for a war with Russia. You will see it in all the media. You will see it in the statements of the politicians. There are a lot of examples of these very dangerous deliberations. You already know them, I guess. As far as economy is concerned, also it's not, you shouldn't be an expert to see that by introducing these sanctions, which are damaging to Europe, but which effect on Russia is very limited, if not at all visible. By introducing these sanctions and these measures, Europe deprives itself of a role of one of key international players. So I think that Europe is the only clear loser of this situation because of its growing dependence on the US, because of its decision not to import gas and oil from Russia. So this all will bear on the future of generations to come and on the well-being of European citizens. I think you see them clear living in Germany.
Well, the German economy is in a free fall as a result of being cut off the inexpensive energy from Russia. That's without any question. But one thing which bothers me a lot, and I have asked myself many times how it was possible that given the extremely, one can actually say, generous role of Russia in the time of the German unification, which only was 40 years after the end of the Second World War, where Russia lost 27 million people, in large part due to what Germany did. So, the fact that the history seems to be so forgotten, I mean, how do people in Russia look at this German behavior from that point of view?
It totally breaks our hearts, frankly, because we were very keen on the fact that Germany has changed, that it's another country, that German language was very popular in Russia, that German business was very welcome. I think Germany was one of the key destinations for Russian citizens when they visited Europe. We thought that we have already turned over this painful page of history and there is no need to come back to it. But what we see right now is very much sobering and disappointing because all of a sudden this Russophobia, which we thought was already something out of question, especially in Germany, this hatred to everything Russian, this sense of condescendence towards Russian or even Slavic nations. Sometimes it surfaces now, and you will see politicians and analysts clearly floating these kind of dangerous ideas, and as if nothing has happened. You know that Germany several years ago, for the first time, together with the whole of the EU, voted against the draft resolution that Russia tables every year against glorification of Nazism. This was, of course, a very hard blow to everyone who claims that Germany has changed and that the Nazi past is already something that can be forgotten. We have a lot of disturbing reports about Germans not paying attention to the use of Nazi insignia in Ukraine. I remember myself, some Western journalists acknowledged openly that when Ukrainian fighters come to Germany for treatment and they have Nazi swastikas, tattoos on them, the Germans are just, telling them not to display it, but for them, this is something normal, and this is really incredible. It's hard to believe that there can be such dangerous double standards, and that the country that itself suffered very much for many generations because of its attitude towards Nazism, now kind of trying to put a blind eye to what is happening in Ukraine, to what is happening elsewhere, and instead of trying to find a solution, find a formula of security where Russia would be part of this formula, is now trying to create something that would further put Russia aside from this equation of security. And we know from the lessons of history that it leads us to nothing good, such constructions of European politicians.
When you compare the speech which was given by President Putin in 2001 in the German Bundestag, which he spoke in German for the most part, he mentioned all the German poets, and the attitude was extremely positive. If you compare that with the speech he then gave in 2007 at the Munich Security Conference, which was a very stark, almost warning to the world, where do you locate the shift, or what happened in these years which caused this complete difference in attitude?
The answer is very clear. It's the enlargement of NATO. The speech in 2001, I think, was on the eve of these events, but we clearly believed that there would be a kind of transformation of the security architecture in Europe, in line what we were discussing during the end of the Cold War, during the moment when Germany was reunified. There were high hopes that NATO would cede its place to something more universal, including Russia, including other players, that there will be some kind of a merger between NATO and OSCE. But by 2007, it became absolutely clear that there will be no such change, and that the West has declared itself the winner in the Cold War, and decided to take all the spoils, if I can use this expression, and this was a big change in our understanding of reality. And I think that President Putin's speech in Munich in 2007 was a stark warning to everybody of where we are heading and what problems we might face unless we take necessary corrections, unless we start to better understand each other and to take on board each other's vital interests. And I think that this was really a speech that materialized later. We see all the problems that he named were exactly there. There was this Georgian crisis after the West was already at this stage preparing Ukraine for the moves that happened in 2014. You remember that in 2004, there was the first attempt, the so-called Orange Revolution, to bring Ukraine to the pattern that Ukraine is displaying right now, the ultra-nationalism, Russophobia, all these things. So in 2007, we already saw these trends, and we could already make predictions of what is waiting ahead for us. And I think that President Putin was absolutely right by issuing such a stark warning. And regretfully for us, for everybody, everything that he said came true, and we have what we have right now.
Well, in Germany, whenever you mention the name of Russia, you have to introduce the sentence with the unprovoked illegal war of aggression. If you don't say that, you are already out. Now, how comes that the entire global South did not buy this NATO narrative of the reasons for the Ukraine war?
We were consistently explaining of how we got there, what were the root causes of Ukrainian crisis. In the Security Council, for many years before preceding this 2022 start of our special military operation, we were raising attention of everybody to the fact that the Minsk agreements were not implemented, that there are so many indications that Ukraine is preparing for war, that there are no changes, no implementation of the Minsk plan of action that could lead to the resolution of Ukrainian conflict. So we were doing this consistently, and after the start of our special military operation, we also spent much effort in explaining where we are, in explaining our position. From day one, you can check our statements. We were saying that Russia would prefer a diplomatic resolution of this conflict, a diplomatic implementation of the goals of our special military operation. And we had this chance in March and April of 2022, after there was a draft treaty initialed in Istanbul by Ukrainians. So we had a lot of chances to prove to the global South the real intentions of Russia, and it really is paying back. First of all, I can tell you that maybe in Germany you need to use these words, unprovoked aggression, all these things, but you will not hear this anymore in the UN. After President Trump came to power, the rhetoric of Western countries, not only the US, but also France and UK and the others, on Russia, they are not using anymore this construction of unprovoked aggression, because this looks silly in in the current circumstances about when we know so many things about events preceding this war. This looks funny and not serious. So these terms are not used anymore in the UN, maybe with the exception of Ukrainians, Poles, and Baltic states. Sometimes they come back to this rhetoric, but it looks really outlandish against the backdrop of what everyone is saying. So there is a big correction of how international community views the Ukrainian crisis. I can give you a recent example. Russia held a meeting. We were presidents of the Security Council in October, and we held a meeting on the day of the UN, the 24th of October, on the 80th anniversary of the entry into force of the Charter of the United Nations. We held a meeting devoted to the future of the UN. It was a very solemn event, and many members of the UN, a wider membership, took part in this meeting. But Ukraine and its backers wanted to kind of spoil, to rain on our parade, and they organized a stakeout for journalists before the meeting, trying to say that Russia has no right to speak about the future, about the charter, because it allegedly violates the charter, and blah, 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 all these things. Can you imagine how many countries supported this Ukrainian move? Out of 193 UN members, only 45, including Ukraine, agreed to participate in this kind of performance. 45. If you take European Union and NATO members, you will see that this is almost exactly the number of countries that are there. US didn't participate, Hungary didn't participate, some NATO members didn't participate, only 45 countries. If you compare it to what was the number of the countries at the beginning of our special military operation in 2022 backing Ukraine, you will see how the support of Ukrainian case has diminished during these years and months, because people have opened their eyes and they really see the real circumstances of what is happening and why it happens now in Ukraine.
Well, I know that, in reality, Europe has self-isolated itself incredibly, but people don't know it. It's funny, it's as if you are living in a different universe. But the countries of the global south are trying to create a new economic system. They have organizations like the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Eurasian Economic Union, ASEAN, and many others. And, some people think this is against the West, against the dollar. But many leaders of these countries have stated that they are not forming a bloc against another bloc, but that these organizations are actually open for cooperation with the West. So would the problem not be solvable, the whole strategic problem not be solvable, if European nations and the United States would just take a different attitude and say, let's change confrontation into cooperation? Would that not work?
That would work, but unfortunately, there are no signs that US and Europe are ready to adopt some reasonable positions in this regard. You mentioned the issue of the dollar, and you're absolutely right that all these economic constellations that you see right now booming, like BRICS, for example, they are not aimed against any country. They have, as a core principle, they have their mutually beneficial and equal cooperation among themselves. But of course, they have to react to what is happening. And I can reveal to you a secret that there is only one country in the world which is making very big damage to the dollar. And this country is the United States, because all the policies of the United States show that United States wants to use dollar as a tool, as a weapon. And what would you expect from other countries when they understand that investing in dollar is risky, that dollar can be used as a punishment if this country doesn't want to perform independent policy? All these secondary sanctions that US tries to impose on other countries, they are also based on the use of dollar. So of course, the natural reaction from many countries from the global south would be to kind of not to be too dependent on dollar, to put a number of eggs in another basket, not only in the dollar basket. So this is a natural reaction of financial markets, of those circles in developing countries who are responsible for strategic planning. And the only country to blame for it is the United States, is the policy of the United States. We said it clearly that there was absolutely no task, neither in Russia nor elsewhere, to get rid of dollar as a reserve currency, as a very important tool. But United States, because of its policies, because of its aggressive behavior, kind of pushed the whole world to understanding that dollar is not safe. Same thing about euro. You know that there are a lot of moves in the EU which have not yet materialized in anything practical, but which are very provocative, about confiscation of Russian assets. And this is also something that people in developing countries are hearing, that if this move will be made, it will be, of course, a very devastating blow to the reputation of the EU, to the financial credibility of the EU, because they will confiscate sovereign funds, which is absolutely unimaginable thing, and which is a backbone for economic and financial stability of Europe, guarantees that these funds will not be touched. There will be, of course, the chain reaction after this. It's quite clear, and I think that's the only factor that stops a lot of politicians and those who are taking these decisions in member states to give green lights to such policies. But even the discussions on this issue are very damaging. They show that euro is also not a very reliable instrument, economic instrument, and a lot of countries try to diversify their economic ties, to diversify the currencies they use. And for example, as far as Russia is concerned, we have significantly diminished our use of dollar and euro in our trade. I heard figures with China, for example, that 86% of trade, if I'm not mistaken, I may be mistaken in figures, but the trend is like this. So 86% is made either in rubles or yuans in our bilateral trade. So we're not dependent on dollars or euros in a lot of things between Russia and China. Same about our domestic and foreign trade. We are also not dependent on dollar anymore, and that's why the limits of the sanctions is very limited, the scope of the sanctions.
Well, immediately after the special military operation started in February 22, I issued a call for the establishment of a new global security and development architecture, which must take into account the interest of every single country on the planet. Now, in the meantime, President Putin has called for an international order where countries would work together like instruments in a polyphonic symphony. And then he said at the Valdai Club, and I want to read you this quote, "Today's world is an exceptionally complex, multifaceted system. To properly describe and comprehend it, simple laws of logic, cause and effect relationships, and the patterns arising from them are insufficient. What is needed here is a philosophy of complexity, something akin to quantum mechanics, which is wiser and in some ways more complex than classical physics." Would you care to comment on that?
Well, I think that's obvious. This is very rational analysis, and it's hard to comment on this because this is true, I think.
Well, then let me ask one more question in the same direction. Recently, Pope Leo XIV talked in his Jubilee sermon on October 25th in front of thousands of pilgrims who were at the St. Peter's Square. He mentioned the great thinker of Nikolaus of Kuz, who obviously is very famous in Russia. He's known as Nikolai Kosansky, and he influenced, for example, Vernadsky very much. So the Pope revived the memory. He said he may not be very known to many people, but he was very important because he came up with a conception called the coincidentia oppositorum, the coincidence of opposite. as a method of resolving problems where the solution is not yet clear, but because of the creativity of the human mind, the vis creativa, that you can conceptualize a solution on a higher plane than the level on which the problem arose. And I have been making speeches about that for several decades already as a method of always thinking the higher one first, and that way you can come up with solutions to seemingly unsolvable problems. So how do you think this fits with President Putin's symphony conception?
I think that President Putin's conception and President Putin's speeches directed to the West are showing very much that we are open-minded. We're still not closing the door for a dialogue, because we haven't closed this door from the outset. That was Europe and European politicians that didn't want to speak to us. But when they want to speak to us, they know how to find it. When President Macron wanted to call President Putin, he answered his call, and I think that was the best proof that we are open for any dialogue. So I think that what is necessary, what is really very in big deficit in politics in Europe right now, in this is this common sense, first of all, and openness of the mind, the ability to think out of the box, because unfortunately, there are a lot of ideological dogmas. I can call them only ideological, Russophobic dogmas, which can't be overridden by a lot of politicians for different reasons, but mostly because they are not capable of doing it, because they want to live in this bubble that is being inflated, in the bubble of lies, in the bubble of Russophobia. Maybe they feel safe and comfort in this warm bath, but this is not how the real world lives, and this is very damaging to Europe, to European interests. Not to mention, of course, the very strange role of European Commission and of those people who are supposed to navigate Europe through these turbulent waters, but in fact they are doing their best to sink the European ship while it sails. So there are a lot of factors, and I think that what renders a bit of an optimism is that there is more and more understanding that something went wrong in Europe, and there are more and more people in Europe who are asking legitimate questions to their rulers, to the governments, and who reject this absolutely reckless policy that is being conducted by European ruling circles vis-à-vis Russia, vis-à-vis Ukraine, vis-à-vis European security architecture, those who are really asking for change and demanding this change. So this, for me, is a sign of optimism, and I hope that this mood will prevail, and we will be able to agree on a lot of differences that we have, and to build some common future together, because I think that Russia and Europe, being neighbors, if we manage to put aside all these divergences that we have very much in common, not only from the point of view of culture, but also for economic development. So hopefully this logic will prevail, and we will have an opportunity to preserve bright future for the upcoming generations, and not another military problem in Europe, where we are heading right now.
Well, that needs to be avoided, because I'm convinced that if it comes to that, it will end in a catastrophe for all of humanity. But, I think we should, or maybe you can think about something to say to the European youth and American youth for that matter, because young people always strive to, I mean, it's their future. And in a certain sense, the older people have no right to leave them a world in complete rubble field and shattered. So what hopeful thing you can, or how would you address the young people of the world, what they should do to, to help to make a better world?
I think that I have the impression that a lot of European youth and Western youth in general, they are living now behind the Iron Curtain. resembling to me very much the way we lived in the Soviet Union when I was a youngster, and we heard a lot of things about the West, and we heard a lot of, we didn't know a lot of things, I would say, which was very bad for us, but we managed to overcome this, and there is no censorship right now in Russia about any information coming from the West. We're not afraid of discussions with anyone with defending our point of view. It's the West who is afraid. It's the West who doesn't want to get into discussions with us and who prefers to close the doors, to seal the windows, and not to get any information about true situation in Russia, to get to European young people first and foremost. And I believe that this is very dangerous, and I would appeal to them, I would implore them to open their eyes and to see what's really happening, to ask themselves legitimate questions. Why is it necessary to plan a war with Russia right now in Europe? What are the reasons behind this? What will be the implications of this war? And unfortunately, this is where the warmongering ruling classes in a lot of countries are pushing their countries right now. So this is very dangerous. And I also advise to use different sources of information. I'm not advising younger generations in Western countries to watch only RT or to base their opinion on Russian state media, but they should bear this in mind, and they should base their position, their judgments on the facts and not on the assumptions and not on the claims. And also, I would invite everyone to come to Russia. There is nothing to be afraid of. Russian economy is booming right now. Moscow is an excellent city. St. Petersburg is an excellent city. There are a lot of booming cities in Russia as well. You will see the difference. You will understand that everything that Western propaganda is saying against Russia is not true, against Russians as well. And also, I hope that there will be a solution to this crisis in Ukraine, a solution that would be satisfactory for everybody and which would be fair, which would address the root causes of this problem, which would eradicate all the efforts to revive Nazism, to revive nationalism, that would bring us all to level playing field in terms of treatment of national minorities, that there will be no more Russophobia, no more discrimination of Russian speakers only because they want to keep their identity. I think that's a fair deal, and that's something that is for the interest of Europe itself, not only for the interest of Russia or Ukraine. Europe itself should live up to its values and to implement them evenly everywhere, including Ukraine. And what is happening in Ukraine, of course, is very much undermining the Western values and the claims that Europe is making about defending democracy and human rights.
Well, I would like to talk to you for a very long time because I have many more questions, but you told me ahead of time that your time is limited. So I want to thank you very much for this discussion, and hopefully we can continue it sometimes in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and all the best to all those who still love Russia and believe in Russia, in Europe and in Germany. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.